Hello, everyone. I'm Hiro Natani, VP of Marketing at Agiloft. Welcome to today's webinar to meet Eric Laughlin, Agiloft's new CEO. The webinar will be a Q&A format for about 30 minutes. And you can submit your questions in the chat window in the GoToWebinar platform. So I'm going to kick off by starting. Welcome, Eric, first of all. Tell us a little bit about your background, career and personal. What did you do before Agiloft?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Hiro, and nice to sort of meet everybody virtual in this format. Hope to meet everybody in person at some point here, but thanks for joining us. So before Agiloft, I spent the last decade or so in legal tech and tech-enabled services, primarily at Thomson Reuters, and then a little bit at Ernst & Young. The majority of my time was at Thomson Reuters, where my businesses served, for the most part, corporate legal departments, both with content, with software, and with services. Thomson Reuters and myself, I was involved in acquiring a lot of businesses and growing them. A couple examples include Serengeti. So you may know Serengeti as an e-billing and matter management platform. It's now called Thomson Reuters Legal Tracker. It's one of the leading mid-market, e-billing and matter management tools. And so, we grew that from, well, we don't need to go into the numbers, but grew that business pretty significantly, turned it into a global business. More recently, I worked on the Pangea 3 business. Pangea 3 is an alternative legal service provider, originally known as a LPO, or legal process outsourcing company. And it was one of the first organizations to take on the traditional law firm model and put low cost or lower cost and high process, high technology oriented lawyers, into the litigation space and into the contract space. So with that Pangea 3 team, we worked on, everything from sort of everyday contract drafting to large compliance driven repapering projects for the big global banks. So I spent a lot of time in the contracts world, working on a lot of different contracts platforms. And then, sort of recently, as we took that team from Thomson Reuters into Ernst & Young, I got a chance to see Agiloft as a partner and as a customer. And obviously now as a CEO, I'm getting to know it even better. Personally, I live in Seattle, 3 kids, lovely family here. My wife and I moved to Seattle 4 years ago from Minneapolis, where we were for 13 or 14 years before then.
Great, thanks, Eric. So, great. Let's just expand on that. Why did you take this job at Agiloft?
Oh, sure. Well, it's an amazing company that I'm proud to be a part of and proud to lead now. And if you sort of rewind the clock back to my Pangea 3 experience, the thing that we did a lot of was work with companies who were undergoing or in some part of their contracts transformation journey. So a lot of legal departments who were thinking about doing things differently. And the ones who were successful were thinking about how do you use law firms successfully, in-house resources, alternative service provider resources, and then how do you connect all of those resources using good process, and how do you sort of enable that process through through excellent use of technology platforms. And the thing that stood out, no matter which client we were working with, sort of big or small, and what part of their journey that they were on, is that nothing was sitting still, right? Nobody has this entirely figured out. So you might be in the beginning of your journey in modernizing contracts, you might be pretty mature, but regardless, it's an ongoing process. And so, if you're going to have an ongoing process that's got to live with you, you need a technology platform that will continue to evolve, that can be rapidly evolved, that's not so expensive, to configure. And that's one of the reasons that I got so attracted to Agiloft. I got to see it as a partner at EY and got to see just how flexible it was in implementation work and as we were doing consulting sort of around the platform. And that got me really interested in Agiloft. And I think Agiloft has a pretty unique approach to CLM because of the BPM no-code platform that it's built on. And I think it's just a really great fit for CLM. So when I talked to Colin, I got to know Hiro, I got to know Colin as a partner at EY. And I got to go to the summit last year and meet a bunch of you. I see that there's a lot of partners and customers on the webinar today. So I love the enthusiasm at the summit. It was just great to meet everybody. It was great to connect with folks, and I saw a lot of people who had pinned a lot of their sort of their work and their journey around contracts to Agiloft, and were excited about it. And I think that the folks that I talked to saw lots of opportunity to continue to evolve on the platform and continue to do better on Agiloft, and felt like Agiloft was not only a great platform, but a good set of people. And I found that all to be true, right? As I started working with Hero and working with Colin more closely in March as an advisor, I saw what a great company it was from the inside. So I was very excited when Colin asked me to be the CTO. Colin decided to be the CTO and asked me to be the CEO and to go out and get funding. So glad to be here.
So great that you brought up funding. Agiloft announced a big Series A with FTV. Right. Why did you take money after bootstrapping for so long? The company's been profitable, and it's that's been its culture.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're right. It's a big part of the sort of Agiloft story is that Colin and Bridget and the whole team were able to do this and sort of think way ahead of the curve, create this no-code platform when no-code was not a buzzword, right? Sort of way ahead of the curve on that side. I think Colin and the team recognize that CLM demand is so hot right now that we absolutely need to scale the business and sort of make the business bigger in a pretty fast, in pretty short order. If you look at some of the studies that are out there, you see the Forrester study shows that 15% of companies have enterprise-wide or end-to-end CLM implementations, but the same group of people, 85% of those companies say that they will have enterprise CLM in the next few years. So that amount of demand and the amount of sort of growth that Agiloft would have to do to respond to that, it just took a little more than bootstrapping could offer. So we went out to market the company and look for investment. I think we were, or I shouldn't say we were surprised, but pleasantly got a very good reception from the investment community. There were I think there's a lot of interest in CLM from the investment community, and because of that hot market. I think Agiloft is seen as having a pretty unique approach and getting really good recognition in the market, both from the analyst community as well as from customers who really believe in Agiloft and say great things about it. So there's great product market fit, and that sort of unique approach to CLM made us a pretty attractive investment. And in fact, we had a lot of good demand in the process. I think one of the things that was interesting as we went through the investment process is to think about who your partner is going to be. We chose FTV, and we had interest from a number of different styles of investment outfits. And I think one of the things that's interesting about FTV is they fit into this category that's growth equity. So it's not a VC, it's not venture capital, it's not straight private equity. And you might think of those sort of ends of the spectrum where this growth equity sits right in the middle. They are investing in growing businesses. They are growth oriented, but they're not it's not venture capital where you're sort of throwing money at lots of ideas and hoping one of them sticks. The idea is to nurture the business, to grow it responsibly, and to to have a really good result. But it's a great partner to have, or FTV is a great partner to have, because they sort of sit in that space, and they've funded a number of founder-led bootstrap companies just like us.
So speaking of FTV, since you brought that subject up, how involved is FTV in the operations of the company?
Right. Well, they're a minority shareholder. They have board positions, so I interact with them regularly as board members, and then they bring a lot of additional help to the table as well. So, for example, on the hiring of sort of key talent, they've got great networks around talent. They bring a lot of benchmarking and best practices, and they have a portfolio. There's two places that they help on the network side. One is that they have a big portfolio of investments that are certainly helpful connections for Agiloft to have, and they have something that's called the Global Partner Network, which is a network of folks. A lot of them are in the financial services industry, but a huge network of folks that get together and have a community of sort of learning and networking. In fact, I'm headed to the Global Partner Network's annual meeting coming up here next week. Of course, it's virtual, but they certainly have a great network for us to tap into.
So a question that's come in from Donna: what is your strategy for managing the growth surge Agiloft is experiencing?
The growth surge, is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Donna, for that question. So, there's a lot that we want to do. I mean, we can sort of take it in the short-term, long-term thinking. In the short term, we are growth oriented, and we have to invest behind that. So, a lot of I guess the investment will come in a few different places. One is to think about the ways that we can invest in client-facing presence, both global and local. Another is to think about how we invest in the platform, and then certainly think about how we invest in our global partner ecosystem. So on the client-facing side, because it's been a small company and because it's been virtual, we've done a lot with a little in terms of the people that we have, in terms of the places where we have our team. And so we'll be able to expand the number of places where we have sales teams. For example, just within the United States, there's plenty of room for us to grow the sales team. Certainly globally as well, we have to work with our partners to make sure that we're having an approach that works for EMEA and APAC as examples. On the platform side, there's still plenty of investment that we can make in this platform. One of the things that I think is amazing is how well developed the platform is, but yet I know that there's more that we can do on the underlying platform. Things like continue to invest in AI that powers the platform. On the user sides, we've got a big project that we're going through right now to freshen up and sort of do a facelift on the GUI. And there's plenty of work for us to do in creating better and better integrations with other enterprise systems. And those are all short-term priorities for us. In the long term, because we get to think more broadly and think more aggressively with the funding, the story and the idea of CCLM, of contract and commerce lifecycle management, can really come to life in a new way, or in a way that we're now even more capable of bringing to life. When I talk to customers, as we were leading up to the announcement and just after the announcement, some of them use this analogy of Agiloft as a set of Lego blocks or Lego bricks that you can build with and use for lots of different purposes. And one of the things that we went through as a team that Hiro and I have just seen recently is we asked the implementation team to look at all of the different applications that we've built on top of or used Agiloft to build for our customers. And they came back with lots of great examples. Customers that have used us for vendor management, customers that have built contract performance applications, matter management, elements of quote to cash applications, lots of different experiences that fall next to and sort of bolted on to CLM. And so in the long term, we can take those experiences and those applications and make sure that we can make those available for all of our customers, or all the customers that that want to have those bolted onto their CLM tool, and therefore connecting CLM into those commercial aspects of the enterprise. And so we'll figure out how to productize those and make those things available not just to our customers but to our partners.
So great, that's a good synopsis of long-term and short-term priorities. The company announced that Colin was going to take on the role of CTO. So what does that mean?
Yeah, so when I started working with Colin, one of the first things we talked about was how he built the company, and certainly he has been very, very deep in the technology platform, and I just publicly give him a lot of praise right now for thinking so far ahead on the no-code platform. Technology is definitely Colin's passion, and he has joked more than once to me that he's getting a promotion into the CTO role because that's the spot that he wants to be in. That's sort of his sweet spot. So I'm very excited to have him as a partner in that CTO role. He's a critical part of the executive team.
So here's a question, since we're talking about growth, Agiloft has built a reputation for strong customer service.
Mhm.
How will you preserve that culture as the company scales?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, coming from a professional services background for the last few years, obviously that's of paramount sort of importance to me. And I'll also say that one of the things that I saw when I came into Agiloft was that we have great net promoter scores, we have great customer references. When the analysts call our customers, they get good reviews, and so many of you serve as references for new prospects. So we have this really nice base of support and loyalty from our customers. And to me, that's a massive advantage for us in the market as we try to grow. But it's also just a really good place to come from in terms of partnership. So partnership, with our clients, and as I mentioned earlier, everybody's on this sort of journey of continuous improvement in contracts, and coming from a place of a good relationship is the place where you of course want to start from. So preserving that is critical to me. One of the things that I saw when I came in was that Agiloft didn't have a customer success group. So one of the first things that I did, even before I became CEO, and Colin, Colin sort of said, "Go for it, Eric. It sounds like we need a customer success group. Let's build it." So we started to build this customer success group, and that team's orientation is towards making sure that everyone is satisfied with their experience on the platform, that they're getting what they want out of it, that they understand how other customers are approaching the same problems they have, and then they get access to our teams to help fix any issues or any blockers that are getting in their way. So that's just an example to say, I'm very committed to the services element of the company and of the relationship we have. I think the other critical part of that customer service and sort of customer orientation is how well we work with our partners. I think it's coming from a place where I became an EY Agiloft sort of partner, or became a partner to Agiloft as a part of EY, and now I'm sitting on the other side. I see how important that is for everyone in our partner community, that they feel like Agiloft has an orientation towards working with partners for the success of our clients. So a number of you have already reached out to me, and I'm happy to speak to all of our partners about what that could look like. One thing that I think we can continue to improve is our ability to help train and keep our partners abreast of the latest the latest sort of goings on and releases and upgrades and things like that are coming out with the Agiloft platform. So that training can both keep us close and make sure that every customer that our partners are touching gets the best service that they possibly can, whether they're working directly with us or through our partners.
So great, Eric. I'd just like to remind the audience that you can ask Eric a question by typing it into the questions pane in the GoToWebinar platform. So Eric, here's another question. Agiloft has been focusing on the CLM market. You've talked a lot about the CLM market. What about ITSM and the other products that Agiloft has in its portfolio?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great example of the ITSM and sort of other experiences or other apps that people are using Agiloft for. Those are great examples of just what Agiloft is capable of. So we're committed to supporting those applications. And in fact, as we grow what Agiloft is, what Agiloft means to people, it will become more than CLM. It will become those applications that are connected to CLM. And so when we invest in the platform and the underlying capabilities of the platform, we're going to be testing whether those capabilities, can be used, in the current space that we're in CLM or in places like ITSM, or in the additional, things that I mentioned earlier, things like vendor management or CPQ. A good example is how do we think about leveraging, how do we think about leveraging AI and the work that we're doing in the background there to power lots of different experiences, not just the CLM experience. So certainly something that I'm tuned into and plan to support.
So now that you've been on the job for a few weeks, what are your thoughts about your decision? Did the reality align with your expectations?
Yeah. Well, I love the marketing leader. No.
Hey.
Yeah. So it's been fun getting to know the team and getting to know customers and partners. I think the thing that stood out to me in conversation after conversations that I've had is that customers and partners really appreciate Agiloft, the people and the platform, and there is a lot of sort of happiness with how things have performed. They like the flexibility of the platform. They appreciate the execution that our implementation team and that our partners have provided. I think what I've heard in terms of improvement have been along a few lines. One common theme is, as good as our implementation is and as good as our partners are, how do we bring more and more best practices to them? So so how do we take the whole experience of 600 customers and package that up in a way that's consumable for the 601st, 602nd customer, and then how do we take those best practices and bring them back to the full group of 600? And so that's something that I heard people asking for, and I like that idea. That sort of really speaks to where I come from on the professional services side of the world. So that was one piece of feedback I heard, which I think was right on. The others line up really well with our product roadmap. So continued use of AI. So we have two approaches to AI. One is custom AI projects. Some of our largest customers are engaging with us and our data science team on custom or really on bespoke AI projects with their own data and their own training. And those are having really good results. The other approach to AI is having shared AI capabilities. So we'll continue to train train the machine learning algorithms on more contract types, more clause types, sort of more data types, so that anybody can use that utility, or anybody can use that service. And when you think about AI, or when I think about AI, I think it's nice to have the magic that we all sort of think about AI. What's most interesting is when you start applying it to lots of use cases. So the use cases that we have right now around contract ingestion during the legacy contract migration process is certainly high on a lot of people's lists. Ingesting a new contract from a third party, from a counterparty that comes in over the wall, and understanding what's in that. And then there are lots of different applications for AI, which involve sort of insight into the documents you're working on, or insight into the portfolio of documents that you have. And so I think customers want to see more and more of that, and that's really lines up well with our roadmap. The other feedback I got was around the user interface, just continuing to sort of stay more modern on the interface. We're working on that. In fact, we have a December release coming out, which will have some pretty dramatic improvements to the user interface. And then lastly, integrations, just making sure that we're always staying up to date and making our, if we can, wherever we can, making integrations with enterprise software as no code as possible. So lots of good feedback from customers, and lots of lots of constructive feedback that lines up with our roadmap.
So great. So roadmap question has come in. Are there any future plans for blockchain and smart contracts?
Interesting. We were just having this conversation yesterday here.
It's not planted.
Yeah, no, interesting. So the answer is we have to figure out what the right use cases are before we start investing in big ways. And I think you see some folks around the CLM world touting interesting things around blockchain and around smart contracts. And I think for the most part, those are experiments. And so we'll be looking for ways for interesting use cases, which may be sector specific, or may even be customer specific if we if we can get into sort of proofs of concept with big customers who want to try things out with us. I think that's a really interesting way for us to experiment in some of those more innovative technologies. And then as we go through, frankly, I'm just too early to tell you exactly what the roadmap looks like there, other than to say, we'd love to engage with our customers in those and see where the interesting use cases are. I'm a big believer that you shouldn't fall in love with the technology, you should fall in love with the problem first, right? So what is the problem find out what that is, really dig into it, and then if it turns out that that problem can be solved, using something like blockchain, then you leverage that. Yeah, I think that the interesting thing on smart contracts is how do we make smart contracts that don't get rigid, right? I think one of the biggest problems with enterprise software is as you custom code things, the systems get rigid. One of the advantages of Agiloft is that because it is no code, it doesn't get rigid. So how can we take advantage of that really important facet of the Agiloft platform to think about smart contracts in a non-rigid, sort of flexible way, or more dynamic way? So more to come there. I will engage in that and would love to engage with partners and customers on those ideas.
So another question that's come in about, do you have any plans for more aggressive internationalization of the Agiloft platform? That comes from Rivaldo.
Yeah, good question. I mean, certainly we believe that that there is demand outside of the U.S. That the product has to meet that. I haven't personally dug into the platform elements or the sort of features, capabilities, or things like that around that. We certainly have the ability to, host globally and make sure that we're doing that, and can expand where, the locations that we host in. But in terms of other international capabilities, I don't know, Hiro, if you have anything, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Agiloft is an international platform. I mean, roughly 20 plus translations. So it has the capability to work in lots of different countries. We have customers actually all over the world, APAC, Latin America, Europe. So it's already an international platform.
Yep.
So another question, you joined at an interesting time in the world. We have a global pandemic going on. How has Agiloft been impacted by the COVID-19 crisis?
Yeah, well, it is an interesting time to join. And in fact, my first week in Redwood City with Hiro and Colin and others was actually the first week of March. And I was the last person, I think, at the hotel that week. By the time I left, it was kind of a ghost town. And that was the last time I got on a plane, was to come from Redwood City back to Seattle. So yeah, it became very real, or all too real, right around then. The interesting thing internally is that you may or may not know, but Agiloft has been virtual for quite some time. While we have a headquarters in Redwood City, there's only a handful of people that actually go into that office every day, and the majority, I'd say 80 to 90% of the company has always been, or for the last few years at least, has been has had virtual presence, right? So we've had people in all locations in the U.S. and Canada, overseas. And so when COVID hit and a lot of companies struggled to go virtual, Agiloft didn't really struggle. We sort of just kept plugging away because that's the way we were used to working. And I found it to be a very good virtual culture. In fact, I was just talking to one of our implementers, half an hour ago, and he said when he joined, he joined Agiloft, and he found that the virtual culture here was much more helpful and sort of community oriented than the office cultures that he'd been in before. And that's what I found as well. It's been very good to get to know people. We're very effective at working virtually. So internally, it hasn't been that much of a bump. Externally, certainly customers have had some have had difficulties. I think the good news is that our customers are, if anything, depending on systems like Agiloft more and more. Contracts, if you look at some of the IACCM, now WCC, their surveys of customers are saying actually CLM tools are more important to us now than they were before. And that's probably because CFOs are asking really hard questions that they can't answer if they don't have really good CLM tools. So, from a business results perspective, what we saw right out of the gates in March and April is we saw a couple of our customers, or actually more than a couple, pausing some of their professional services implementations and then coming back in May and June and starting them up again. So we had a brief sort of moment of time there. On the new customer side and on the sort of expansion side, June and July were, if not the top, two of the highest sales months we've ever had. And so customers are absolutely buying into CLM and expanding their CLM usage right now.
Great. So Eric, we have come to the end of our time.
Wow.
Do you have any final thoughts? 30 seconds or less.
30 seconds or less. It's great to be here. I hope I get to meet a lot of you in person. Hero and I are already talking about when we can get the summit going next year. Hopefully in the fall, we'll all be in a position where we feel healthy, we feel safe, and we feel like we can get together in person, so I can see you then. Until that time, reach out to me on LinkedIn, reach out to me on my Agiloft email address. I'm happy to jump on a call with you because I'd love to meet you.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric Laughlin,
Great.
CEO of Agiloft. Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Hero. All right, bye, everyone. Take care.